What you are about to hear is going to be 75% serious talk. 20% will be two old guys going down a rabbit hole and telling stories about football and rodeo and being at least 5% funny. Please be aware that we may not be grammatically correct or even sound like we know what we are talking about, but we are trying our best to learn and cope with the cards that have been dealt to us. We believe that we can bring hope to those who suffer and help in any way that we can. This is the Head Rush Podcast with Paul Fraze and Corey Berry.
Welcome to the Head Rush Podcast. I'm Paul Fraze, and I played 11 years in the NFL, and our co-host, Corey Berry, rode professional rodeo for 9 years. At the Head Rush Podcast, we talk about everything related to brain trauma, and we talk about brain health and wellness. We talk about traumatic brain injury, TBI, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, TES, traumatic encephalopathy syndrome, and we talk about repeated head impacts, RHI. We cover how traumatic injuries, brain injuries, can and will cause mental health issues such as depression, addiction, lack of executive function, memory loss, even suicide ideology, as well as degenerative neurological issues. These symptoms can be found on the Mayo Clinic and Boston University websites under symptoms of CTE. Our mantra is how to cope and find hope. We focus our energy on finding therapies and sharing hope through education and raising awareness. This episode, I think for all of us, it's gonna be tough, and we're gonna get to the heart of why we do the Head Rush Podcast, why Corey and I have decided to bring hope and bring awareness. And when I said one of the symptoms of repeated head impacts, when I mentioned suicide ideologies, unfortunately, our guest today had to deal with suicide of a dear family member. And personally, I can't even imagine that. I've never been affected from a family member taking their own lives. But we're talking to a son and we're talking to a fiancé that lost their father, future husband. And Casey, the son, welcome. And Kelly,
thank you.
Welcome and thank you for being here. And hopefully Corey and I have been, Corey has been diagnosed since 30 years, his early 30s or late 20s, with some, what was the neurological issues that you dealt with?
Well, at 29, when I found out I had a broken neck, I was sent to UCSF, and they found me with cognitive nerve damage due to concussions and head trauma. And then I dealt with that until 2014 and all the symptoms I was going through. And when that one happened, they said, a year ago, we would have never been able to diagnose you. He continued with the cognitive nerve damage because of the repercussions and said it's all due to hitting my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2019, I went to see Dr. Alan Martin here in Dallas, and it was on my very first neurological exam that it came back suspected CTE. And then again in 2022, when I got in that car wreck, I hit a tree at 65 miles an hour head on because a jackwagon decided to drive at me dead on, and I took to the ditch and lost control. I hit an oak tree at 65 miles an hour head on. And I dealt with all the trauma and that. And then a year and a half later, October of 24, I went down and saw Jeremy Tanner. And he's with UT Health San Antonio, the Glenn Briggs Institute for Alzheimer's and Neurodegenerative Diseases, and also a CTE Evaluation Center that's part of the Boston University. Boston University sent me there to get studied. And with all my past medical records and going through their neurological tests and everything, they diagnosed me TES, traumatic encephalopathy syndrome, probable CTE. TES has 4 categories. It has suspected CTE, possible CTE, probable CTE, and then CTE. CTE only being diagnosed post-mortem. So I'm the closest you can get in a living to being diagnosed with CTE.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so with that, I want to get in, and Casey, me and you had a couple-hour conversations about some of the symptoms and chasing that rabbit down the hole and suicidal thoughts, and I've lived with it. Kelly, get you involved in this a little bit. We will not talk about how it happened or anything that relates to the death of Pete. It's just he committed suicide. I don't want to get into, the steps of what it took for him to do it. I don't think that would do Pete justice on this podcast. But Casey, I got a present for you.
Hit me with it.
I got a special guest coming on.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, can you guess who it is?
I got a few people in mind, but
ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Head Rush Podcast. He's a very well-known cowboy, rodeo announcer. He's been down the road. He's bucked. He's done it all, ladies and gentlemen. Jimbob Custer.
wow.
Jimbob, are you there?
Hey guys, how's it going? Well, I'm happy to be on here today, guys. Pete meant a lot to me, and so happy to be here. Love you guys.
I thought
Me
it'd be
too.
great to have Jimbob on with us to help navigate through some of this, because he's been through it himself. And, I'm going to probably get tearied up here a little bit because it hits close to home, not because I knew Pete, but because he was a bareback rider, a fallen cowboy, and it hits close home to me. I know when I found out, Chad Wallhauser called me up. And Chad's like, hey, did you hear about Pete Kennedy? And I said, no, sir, I haven't. And he goes, he committed suicide. And I was like, oh, wow. And I said, I remember seeing him, but I don't think I ever held a conversation because I'm older than he is. I'm 55, and, I rodeoed back and I retired in 98. But it hit home, and, with my tough cowboy mentality, I've been fighting. I will never do this. I can't do this. I will never commit suicide. We've lost cowboys. I know Jimbob has met cowboys and they've committed suicide. I know cowboys that have committed suicide. I've known cowboys that's had the rage issues. And I actually had a friend kill his wife and himself while their daughter was riding in the arena out back. So this is a very deep subject, but what I'm getting is it opened up my eyes that, I believe suicide is wrong and it's horrible. And I told Casey that when my buddy committed suicide, both of them, One of them, I was asked to do the eulogy, and I was like, no, I ain't going to do it. You know, he took the chicken way out, and I'm not going to support somebody that does that. And this disease, and with me dealing with it now, it made me come to the forefront that
It could happen.
it could happen.
You could.
It is possible. I could chase that rabbit down that hole. I felt it. I mean, it was.
I think it
How long ago did I call you when I was in desperate mood?
right. Very, recently. You feel this way because you've had those thoughts before. And many of us have in one way or another. And when you understand the pain that somebody has been in to do that, we can't even fathom it. We can't even, I want to ask you, Kelly and Casey, how long did you know Pete?
9 years.
9 years. Had you seen a gradual change from 9 years ago until March 10th, I think, or?
No. For me, it's very, very difficult because the suicide was very sudden. I hadn't heard him mention those thoughts, those feelings in years.
Right.
I had seen a slight gradual change in him just in a couple months, like from Thanksgiving until his eventual suicide, but not very much.
So when we talk about the symptoms of CTE, and first of all, we do not know if your dad, your fiance, had CTE. Now, you took, you donated his brain
to University of Pittsburgh, and Casey texted me earlier and said they didn't have an update at this time.
Right.
And we will update everyone here at the Head Rush podcast on what is found on this. But, when it comes to this, the diagnosis, even if it doesn't come back CTE, Bruce Parkman just did a study on adolescents. And if they don't find CTE, you can ask, is there any brain damage, atrophy of the brain, like me and you, Casey, talked about? And maybe that'll give you some more closure if they can find that. My brain's going to Boston University for Ann McKee to study. Paul's brain is doing the same. But Casey, talk to us about your dad a little bit. And then after Casey talks about his dad a little bit, I want to bring up the symptoms up on the screen and kind of go through it with them. And we can discuss how I feel and how Pete feels. And maybe you, Jimbob, may feel a little bit of this and want to talk about it. I know you can't be here for the full hour because you're working, but just have Casey talk about her father, talk about the CTE, and then we'll bring you into Jimbob.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I'll just kind of touch here real quick. I've known Pete for quite a few years. I was kind of trying to figure that out, how long I've actually known him. And I can't even tell you, but it's been probably 25 years or so, and got a chance to travel with him and stuff, and he was a pretty close friend. One of the low points in my life, and Corey, as you and I were talking about my addiction earlier, when I was kind of in the pretty low part of my life, Pete took me in, and I went and lived with him and Dana and Casey there for a bit, and kind of got dried out and stuff, and so he's been a big part of my life in that too. And but I was figuring this. I was just going over in my head how many times I actually saw Pete get knocked completely out in rodeo, and I know for sure 7 times that I was around him. there was other times I know he hit pretty hard and kind of was knocked for a loop and stuff, but 7 times that I can count right now where he was completely out for 20 seconds to a minute, in the arena. So I think that has a big, thing there. And, yeah, so I just, if I can interject anything here, I know it was a shocker to me. I know Pete was doing well and he was excited about announcing rodeos and he was getting some jobs and things were going pretty good there. And, so it was a little confusing for me, that it went down the way it did, but at the same time, I understand and I know a little bit, with Ty Posbon and Corey, as we were talking about, is it Ocho Cinco, the football player?
Yeah.
That's kind of when it really came out. And so I think there's something to that. And I myself in my life, and I know a lot of that was probably due to addiction, but, man, I fought suicidal thoughts, and actually kind of got real close to it one time and had a little intervention. So I know it's real and it's a real thing, so as hard as this podcast will be today to talk about all these things, I mean, I know Pete in my mind, I'm settled with it because I know, and we've had many conversations going down the road. He was a believer in Jesus Christ. His spirit is saved, and no matter what's happened to his body, he's going to get a new body when the resurrection happens for us all. And so I'm going to see my friend Gant, and that brings me peace.
Amen to that hope. Amen to that hope and that faith.
Welcome to the Head Rush Podcast, brought to you by the Patrick Risha CTE Awareness Foundation. Karen Siegel, thank you so much. Paul?
So go to stopcte.org, learn about their foundation, and they are sponsoring us for the next year. We are thrilled to have them team up with them and bring awareness to this disease.
So please go to their Facebook page, go to their website, check them out. Karen is very, very, very willing to work with you. Contact her, and if you do know her, thank her for us, or just go on their Facebook page and say thank you for sponsoring the Head Rush Podcast.
One thing that we do share about head trauma, one severe or even moderate a TBI, traumatic brain injury, can actually change your whole persona within a year.
Your personality.
You can be a different person after one of those 7 concussions, or, and it's amazing that, the first question out of neurologists, Corey was mentioning the Bruce Parkman study. He funded a study at Boston University. Well, Bruce's son at 18 years old ran off a 80-foot cliff.
30 steps.
29 steps in 7.2 seconds, and that's how Bruce explains it. And he did not have CTE. Bruce found somebody that understood CTE, said donate the brain. They donated the brain, and he did not have CTE, but Bruce kept pushing and said to the pathologist, the neuropathologist, hey, can you check the white matter? Can you check the prefrontal cortex? Can you check for brain damage? And he had brain damage. So the study, and it's in peer review right now, but the study, it was 162 kids under 30 years old passed, and almost 40% had CTE, and every one of those 162 kids had, and these were athletes, whether young men, women, all 162 actually had mental health issues. All 162 had brain damage. Whether it's the frontal lobe, the occipital lobe, whatever it was, they had brain damage. And I Bruce Parkman said that 80 of the 162 actually committed suicide. And that's mental health issues, period. Because out of 162 people, young people under 30 years old, you're not going to have 50% that have suicide ideologies unless you gotta hit to the head or some type of just horrible trauma, right? And Corey, you've shared with me, you didn't have suicide ideology. You didn't have thoughts of suicide until your big accident in 2022. 2022.
Mm-hmm. I didn't have any suicidal ideology. I had a little bit of executive function, neurological function, behavioral changes, some trembling in my right hand. I had all of that. But once the big accident happened, for a year, I mean, I didn't know from day to day. You know, I had it planned out. I mean, that's the problem, I believe, with this disease is we plan it out. We think about it so much. And Jim, you talked about how you had suicidal thoughts. We think about how we're going to do it. So once your mind is chasing down that rabbit hole, you already know it. And that's the problem. You already know how to do it. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to plan it. It's already there. And me, Colt, I'm a hard believer in exactly what I just said. And I think with the steps that came up, that's what happened to Pete is he was chasing that rabbit down the hole and it just happened. It was he already had the thought process from the damage and his suicidal thoughts. So it's not like I have to think about going and purchasing a gun or buying a knife or how am I going to do this? It's already there. You already know it. Am I right, Jim?
And, you know, Casey can kind of give you a little bit of insight on that too. And, you know, if we can get him on here and talk about that a little bit, because, you know, when this happened, you know, one of the things that Casey told me was, he said, Uncle JB, I was kind of prepared for this for a long time. Like we've kind of known that Dad has these thoughts and things for a very, very long time. So, you know, Casey, you can kind of fill him in on that a little bit.
For sure.
Yeah.
You know,
so Casey, you want to talk about a little bit and talk about your dad and,
yeah,
you know, talk about how he taught you how to ride, you know?
Yeah, for sure. You know, one thing about my dad, you know, he was one of a kind. I mean, there was only one Pete, and I know Kelly and Jimbob can second that. You know, he always wanted the best out of people, and he always wanted the best out of me. You know, whether, you know, we saw eye to eye on beliefs or whatnot, he always wanted me to be the best I could be. And I always appreciate that, you know, but going to what Jimbob was talking about, you know, I was about, you know, talking about knockouts and injuries. I was really young when my dad was rodeoing. So, you know, I remember little bits and pieces, but one thing I do remember, and it's about when his mind took a turn and got a little strange. It was 2007, Old Tucson Studios here in Arizona. They used to have rodeo buckouts. And he went out the back door on the kick of a saddle bronc. And he was out, I can't even remember how long, but as a 6-year-old kid, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my dad's gone. Like, he's not moving. And ever since that moment, it slowly, progressively got worse. And especially at that time, there's so much unknown about brain injuries and CTE. You're just wondering what the heck's going on. And I was about, you know, 12, 13 years old when he first brought up the suicidal ideology. And, you know, I'm young at that point. So I'm like, what the heck? Like, you're not supposed to think like that, because also, to what Jimbob said, my dad was a very holy man. He knew the Bible. He knew God. So it was very uncharacteristic. And it would come in waves. He would go through moments that he was okay, and then out of nowhere, it would hit. And, you know, it would happen every now and then, every few months. And then when I was 15, he moved to Pennsylvania to kind of start fresh with his life. And, you know, I would hear things from here and there about it. He met Kelly, which was, you know, an amazing part of his life. And I'll forever be grateful for what she did for my dad. But all those suicidal ideologies went out the door. Like that wasn't a thing anymore. But like Kelly said, you know, around November, there was a slight change. He, you know, just wasn't himself. And the final 4 days he was alive, you know, I'm a music producer. So sometimes I'm not by my phone a lot. I'm working on stuff. And he was calling me a lot. And I'll forever be grateful for that, because his final 4 days on this earth, I got to talk to him. And it was pure, just genuine conversation. You know, my dad and I had a roller coaster of a relationship. But one thing I can go forward in my life and remember, I love my dad and he loved me. And so Sunday night before everything happened, we had a great conversation, and it was, I love you, Boog. You know, my nickname in the family is Boog. He's like, I love you, Boog. I'll see you later. And that's the last thing I heard from my dad. And it just still doesn't feel real sometimes, you know?
How about you, Kelly? Tell us a little bit about, since he moved to Pennsylvania and dating you and living with you and all of that.
Well, when he moved to Pennsylvania, it was a rough go for him. It was a rough go because I was still living in North Carolina. We had tried in the beginning to live together, and it was when I was drinking and Pete was also drinking. I got sober in 2017, and Pete had a really hard time with the addiction and was still struggling a lot with some mental health problems. I know that he was still struggling with the depression and the anxiety, and that's when he first started going and seeing the doctors down at EPMC. He eventually was able to get on medication there, and that helped him a great amount. And then when we reconnected and he moved down in July of 23, one of my conditions was that he be completely sober. We were not good together if we were drinking. And so he was completely sober. And so for the year and a half that we lived together, we went on our little adventures every single month. Pete and I would openly talk about any of our mental health struggles, any thoughts of anything. We did not argue. I had seen some of his rage prior, a little bit just frustration, anger. It was more when he was in his throes of addiction. And I understand that. Later on, he was very kind, very gentle. But I knew that he still struggled mentally with, it was more some depression. But he never spoke of the suicide. He had talked of suicide years ago, but in the recent years, he was happy. We had future plans. We had all those things. So it was very, very confusing at the end. I mean, we did see a little bit of a change in him. The first time I experienced any of his rage was around like Thanksgiving. And that was like our first real argument. So shortly after that, we had him get into the doctor and start getting ready to see the neurologist and get an additional MRI done. And I know that he must have been really, really struggling in those last day, moments, minutes for him to do that, because that Bible sat on the nightstand every day. It was there. He and I had openly talked about the suicide, about how, he always said that, like you were saying, he was too chicken. He was too chicken. He wouldn't be able to do it. And I don't know what snapped in the end.
One of the things you're going to see, did somebody have something to say? I didn't want to interrupt anyway. One of the things you're going to see, we're going to pop the symptoms up of
Andrew, you want
CTE.
to pop them up?
And so your neurologist, the neurologist that Pete was seeing, do you know, did you sit in any of the meetings with the neurologist?
He killed himself 4 weeks before the neurologist appointment.
Okay.
So he had an MRI done in January, but we had not been able to see. He was just being treated by the family doctor.
Right. I'll tell you just a quick story of my journey down this path. I was doing pretty darn good. I did drink too much, and I lost a son. 15. He was 40 days shy of his 16th birthday, and people would say to me, "I think you're depressed, Paul," and I'm like, "Well, I don't think I am, but I lost a son, so okay, I'm depressed, right?" Well, I was drinking too much, but at 47 years old, something happened. I went totally apathetic. It seemed like my brain chemicals just shut down. Everything was it was weird. And then I had rage. I had uncontrollable rage. Once in a while, I would get angry before, but I would I'd get ticked off and I'd be able to pull it back in. But at that point, I didn't care. Jugular veins popping out. I'm yelling at my 13-year-old beautiful daughter, "You're going to listen to me this time. I'm right. I know I'm right." And about 6 months later, Chris Nowinski, who founded the Concussion Legacy Foundation, who I had known for a few years before because he actually helped us raise some money for our foundation, our son's foundation, the Joshua Fraze Foundation. But he was already working with Boston University. He said, "Hey, Paul, you want to? We're trying to find biomarkers for CTE. You want to come up and do a clinical trial with us?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's go. Something's wrong. I don't know what it is." I started finding out what CTE is, and I said to myself, if I'm organic to the point where I cannot make a cognitive decision to stop my rage, I'm screwed. So I said, you know what? I'm going to make a point of walking out the front door when I feel myself going 0 to 60, and I started doing that. And I went from once every 2 or 3 weeks of rage to once a quarter to once every 6 months to all of a sudden I do it once in a great while if somebody really ticks me off on the road, right? A little road rage. But this is this insidiousness of this disease. If we don't know, and this is why we're doing this podcast, and we're doing, we're talking to you because we want you to know you couldn't have done anything. It wasn't your fault. Even if you were at odds with your dad, you said sometimes rough. Maybe I don't know what with this, whatever. I actually, a friend of mine who I played with in the NFL, he was acting the fool the last 10 years of his life, and he got kicked out of his house by his son. And he died, and it come to find out he has CTE. And I had a conversation with his wife and his 3 kids. And I said, "You didn't know? Don't blame yourself for kicking them out of the house. Don't blame yourself for not doing this, this, and this, and this. You couldn't have done anything." And he didn't know. So I've got guys that I've talked to that want to off themselves, that I played ball with, or I know that played ball, and they once
or do a podcast,
and one said, I want to check out. Time to go. I said, no, there's a better way. So why we do this is there is a better way. And in simply knowing what you're dealing with, if if Pete, I honestly believe, never met Pete, never met any of you, and I honestly believe that if Pete knew about CTE, or he had studied it, or he had understood what his body was going through, he did it. You said, Kelly, that you had seen his rage, but he had calmed down, and he was a gentle person most of the time, I guess, right?
Oh yeah. The only time that I saw the rage was at Thanksgiving.
So
it was one day and he immediately changed.
So
he apologized. Like I think possibly KC might have seen it more. And I know, knowing CTE, there's waves of it. Right. What I saw Pete at the end were more memory problems, more a dementia. And I do know that he was getting more easily frustrated with himself and doing
I noticed that.
Tasks.
I noticed that. Tasks. Yeah. I noticed that too, Kelly. When we talk on the phone, he would talk about how frustrated he'd get and stuff, and the last time I talked to him was in January, and he was kind of planning on going to the IFR and he was going to take the judging course and all that, but he didn't know if he should. And, he just was. I could tell there was something going on there at that time too. So
that's why we had scaled back on doing any of the rodeos this year as well, because it was becoming rodeos are very, very fast paced. His brain couldn't keep up with that. So I was like, okay, well, go ahead. And he's very knowledgeable. He knew his stuff, but it's just his brain could not move fast enough to really announce what he needed to announce. So that's why we were looking at this year doing more of the horse shows.
This episode of the Head Rush Podcast is brought to you by our personal doctor and team of doctors, Dr. Mizelle DeMayo, and she's with the Paradise Behavioral Health, and we are in the
Brainwell program, which is also part of the Millennium Health Center. Dr. Mark Gordon, you've seen him on Joe Rogan and even on our show, the Head Rush Podcast. And hormones. And Mizelle is awesome. We love her.
She's our doctor of psychiatry. She works the Mark Gordon program with the hormones, and she adds her twist of genetics, and it basically is melding two wonderful mediums together, and we're getting great help from Dr. Mizelle DeMayo.
So please check out her website at paradisebehavioral.com. Look up the Brainwell program. Get involved.
She's sponsoring us. They're sponsoring us for the next year, so we are excited to have them on board and shout the good news to everybody that is watching these broadcasts. So,
is she helping you, Paul?
Absolutely.
She's helping me. So go check her out. ParadiseBehavioralHealth.com. If you look at it, it's very, signs of dementia, including memory loss, confusion, impaired judgment, impulse control problems, aggression, depression, anxiety, suicidality, Parkinsonism, and eventually progressive dementia. These signs often begin years or even decades after the last brain trauma or end of an active athletic involvement. And they say 10 to 15 years after your last one.
After your last subconcussive hit, they have found inflammatory cytokines that show you still have inflammation, and basically it's a cascading effect, and especially 7 total knockouts. We know Corey, from kind of going back over his career, had thousands and thousands, probably 10,000 every time that horse bucked. And I don't believe Dr. Kelly.
Nowinski?
No. It was Dr. Kelly that said, I don't. Oh, was it Nowinski?
Yeah.
Anyway, Every time that horse bucked, you said 12 times in 8 seconds.
Right.
And
Would you agree with that, Jimbob? Average is $12 per
Yeah.
8 seconds.
Yep.
So-
12 or 13. Yeah.
And we're talking, you said something like 40 G's, 48?
48 G's it was counted at in Houston, Texas, at Rodeo Houston years ago. They did a study and they put earpieces in the ears of a bull rider and a bareback rider. In a bareback rider, it was on an average of 46 G's, and at one point, it was 48 G's. And when I was talking to a guy about it, I said the 48th G's because he lost his chin, that extra snap. And back in our day, we didn't have the big, and even Jim Bob's day, you didn't have the big neck rolls. We had the self-made with a medical sock, and you wrapped it around your body. So we still had quite a bit of this. And it's like I tell people, you know, Clint Corey, Louis Fields, them guys I don't think will ever see Louis, I guess Casey said that Louis had dementia towards started with a little bit of dementia towards the end. But because they were so proper in their bareback riding, you know, so kept the perfect C, kept the chin tuck, where I was more of the Bruce Ford and Marvin Garrett. You know, I was laid back, lean a little bit to the right so that bind holds a little bit tighter and let her go. And I've been knocked out while on top of a horse.
Yeah. That's how Casey rode him, too. Reared back and spurring the wild out of him.
You know,
You guys are crazy. You guys have a screw loose. I don't know how you do it.
but he runs into a 300-pound man.
Well, yeah, over and over and over and over again. Yeah. No, I say that endearingly.
So if we look at the symptoms, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What'd you have for dinner last night?
I've never been to that restaurant you took us to. Freaking fried pickles.
What else?
I had never had a fried pickle. What else? BLT.
Don't ask me. But I can't.
Took a minute, though.
Yeah, it did. It took a minute. Yeah. I was scratching my head, but
If you look at it, I can't remember my wedding. I know I got married, but I can't remember it. You asked me a movie I watched last week. Don't even think about it. A few days ago. Don't even think about it. Rage issues. You've seen it with me and my wife where I start to get built up.
you pull it back.
I try to
quick.
try to pull it back real quick, and it's hard on us because if you think about it, it's like I told Paul this morning. I was sitting there, dude, talk about things that just flop in your mind. It's flopping right now, matter of fact. But I was thinking about putting feathers on a branch.
That's
And my brain just got stuck on putting feathers on a branch. My brain gets stuck.
Well,
What's the word my wife wanted me to say today?
I don't remember that.
I don't either. You know, and this is what I'm talking about. So it's hard for us. And if you put me, he's seen me in a restaurant setting. He's seen me around a lot of people. My multitasking is shot. You put me, I can't go to a rodeo anymore and enjoy it. There's too much going on all at once, and I can't absorb it. It's too much noise, too much confusion, too much everything. And I miss rodeo. I mean, it was part of my life, my whole life, until I retired in 98.
One thing I wanted to mention, Pete, you said had learned to. So I learned to control my rage because I knew something was wrong, and I started finding out what it was, medically, right? Pete, obviously, there was something about his rage that he did not like. Obviously, he had conversations with you, Kelly. He had probably more heated conversations with you because you got too many tattoos and you're, singing the wrong type of music. I have no idea. Just kidding. Just kidding.
He's a reggae man.
But Pete's faith, that Bible it was telling him how to deal with his rage and his anger, right? Be slow to anger, and that faith, it helped him, and guided him. But this is what and I may have already said this. This is why we do this, because if we educate people about, this insidious disease, this TBI or this CTE, or, hey, you might have hit your head a little too hard. That's why you might be doing the things you're doing. Look into it. And the interesting thing is, we still, you were saying how smart Pete was, right?
Oh, he was smart as a whip, man.
Right.
Yeah.
He didn't lose his ability to think and reason. He just lost his ability to do it fast and do it efficiently and do it where he could actually function out in public. Right. And so, but somehow he did sense the anger and rage was not right, and he wanted to stop it, and he grabbed a hold of his faith, and he was able to do that through his faith. I'm a preacher's kid, so I definitely.
Jimbob is a preacher every morning.
Oh,
you can go to Jimbob Customs at 8 a.m.
6.
Well, 6 a.m. California time, 8 a.m. my time. 6 California his time, and he'll talk about the good book and pray and all of that. So,
and I guarantee, knowing the things that you've been through, and knowing, I mean, you've ridden countless rides and shook in your head a lot, and who knows?
Yeah. Well, and Corey and I were talking, and I think I even talked to Casey a little bit about this, but I talked with Ryan Gray and a couple of other guys that were professional rodeo athletes. And we talked about this too, when I know a little bit about addiction, because I went to a treatment center and found out kind of all the scientific things about, addiction. And, but we go through this life where we rodeo and we're adrenaline rush, and we get these huge amounts of dopamine release, almost like we're drug addicts before we, when we're not actually on drugs and things. And so the more that happens, where you get these unhealthy releases of dopamine, to your brain, your hedonic set point, it's called the feel good meter. Your dopamine release will hit that, and your brain will tell it that feels good. Then it stores it with another excitatory chemical called glutamate as a memory. And the more times that happens over and over and over again, that it goes beyond that set meter, kind of like when you're sick, your temperature raises, so your hedonic set meter gets reset. So now you got a feel good meter that's way up here, and the only thing that can hit that to make it feel good is the same drug that was shooting past the original point to begin with. And now all the regular things like hugging your wife and eating a piece of pie, or just the normal things that we do, working out, things like that, it's not giving us enough of a dopamine to hit that hedonic set meter, the feel good meter. And so that's where the depression comes in. And so, there's something to that as well. And I mean, I know we're talking about CTE and all these other things with the concussions and that, but I just feel like it's all tied together. And, if we could just kind of educate people on what it's going to be like when you quit rodeoing or what have you, then you won't maybe turn to those things that, those addiction, the drugs and chemicals that cause that huge amount of dopamine release. And you're going to kind of know that the depression's coming. And so that was where, for me, going to treatment and finding out about addiction was huge for me, because now I know what I'm fighting. I can see it. It's tangible. I know my enemy, and now I know what I'm fighting. And so I think with this podcast and what you and Paul are doing is a good thing, because it's getting people to maybe realize that if they're seeing some of these symptoms in their life, that could be what it is. And so now we know the enemy, we know what to fight, and now we can make a game plan to fight that. And so, you know, in honoring Pete through all this, you know, it's been a tough deal for me. You know, Pete was a good friend of mine, and we talked a lot throughout the years, and it's been a tough thing for me. But I know one thing, you know, Pete was a guy that wanted to help people. Pete was always a giver. I mean, he was one of the most generous guys that I ever met. I mean, honestly, he was. And so I think, you know, if we can just keep his memory alive and just keep sharing with people, and maybe we can help people, you know, that's what Pete would want us to do. I believe that, you know, and so I think you guys are doing a good thing, and it's a beautiful thing that we're talking about this right now, you know.
And you look at it, I lost empathy, apathy, I can't smell. I can grab Clorox and go, nothing. Mm-hmm. But your feelings, do you feel sympathy?
I when I was 47 years old and that chemical change happened in my brain, I flatlined. I absolutely, and I was a very passionate person before then, and I knew I knew how I knew how I was supposed to feel. And in the empathy and the sympathy, when you have a son with a muscle disorder, he can't walk or crawl, and in the last 5 years you're carrying him around,
right?
You know what that feels like, and you have sympathy and empathy for other people. So I knew what that feeling was, but I lost it. It was crazy. It's gone. But I actually. It was almost like you fake it until you make it.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. You know, my wife just had a gallbladder attack. I had my gallbladder taken out 2 years ago, and I'm like, yeah, I had mine done 2 years ago. No big deal.
But what did you act like, though? Did you force yourself to say, or no?
Yeah. What can I do for you? What is there? I mean, we have to force ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Millennium Health Centers, Dr. Mark Gordon at tbihelpnow.org. He signed on with us. You've seen him in our episode 2 with Dr. Mizell DeMeo and Dr. Gordon.
Dr. Gordon's been featured on a movie, Quiet Explosions, a documentary about TBI. Featured Andrew Marr, a Green Beret blast explosive specialist, and they talk about TBI, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and gosh, I've watched that movie about 4 times, and I know Dr. Gordon has also been on Joe Rogan 6 times, so he has something good and powerful to say about TBI, traumatic brain injury. So go to tbihelpnow.org.
Correct.
And make sure you get in touch with their team. Dr. Gordon also works with the military. Do you want to?
Yeah, he works with the United States military. He's done the Pentagon. He's working real close with them. If you're a veteran and you need help, go to tbihelpnow.org. Dr. Mark Gordon quit his private practice just to work with the military.
Work with veterans suffering with PTSD.
Right, PTSD, TBIs, and repeated blast impacts.
Exactly.
And if you are a veteran, there's nothing closer to my heart than the people that serve our country and protect our way of right and our way to be able to do this podcast for you. So go to tbihelpnow.org and get the help you need. Mark Gordon, we work with him on the Brainwell program through Mizell DeMeo. If you go to tbihelpnow.org, there's a list. There may be a provider in your area in Canada. He's all over. So go to tbihelpnow.org and check it out. Nicola Duke sent this to me. Romans 5:3-5. And this may help Casey and Kelly. Not only that, but we also rejoice in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
That's what keeps me driving, is because it says it right there. Suffering produces endurance, endurance into character, character into hope. So
Amen.
I wanted to read that before you go, and I appreciate you
Jimbob.
being here, Jimbob.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. You bet, guys. Thanks for having me on here, Casey. I'm glad I could come on with you but today, buddy, you and Kelly both. And just know I love you guys, and I'm thinking about you. And give me a call later.
Yep, we'll do, Uncle JB. Love you, man.
Love you too, buddy. Corey and Paul, thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye. So, Casey, back to your father, and Kelly, you could chime in with what I've been talking about on my symptoms and what I deal with. And I've told you I've chased the black hole, or the rabbit down the hole. You know, when me and you talked, you said that it helped you so much understanding that someone else was going through it, like, and me and Pete were a lot alike in that symptoms. And it means so much to me when you said that, because I just hope that I can bring something to you. And Karen and Kelly, if there's anything I can do, or if you have any questions, please ask us. I mean, that's why we're here. Do you have any thoughts or any questions about what you think?
My hardest thing is just knowing it's just what I have to deal with, seeing and how quickly things can change for you guys. I mean, I knew Pete when he did have those suicidal thoughts before, but everything had changed so much after he moved to North Carolina. For him to have that small fall last around like Halloween, and within a couple weeks, I started experiencing some changes with him. How quickly even just a simple fall can change a personality in a person.
It flips a switch with me if I trip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I could bounce against. I could bounce against the wall, and next thing you know, I'm pissed. Because what normal man can't walk down a hall without bouncing against the wall? What normal human can't make that dang turn? It just gets me irritated, and I get fired up. I'll get in the shower, and I have to do everything in steps now. I can't just go, well, soap now, do this, and then do this. It has to be outlined.
That's what I was having to start to do with Pete in those last couple weeks. Was I was having to literally write things down for him, like a to-do list, steps. But I knew it was hard for me to explain to him that knowing whatever I assume, no matter what, when somebody has that much trauma to the brain with those repetitive head injuries over the years of rodeo that he had, you're going to have damage to the brain, and it's going to be progressive and degenerative. And I would try and stress that to him, that no matter what medication he was going to go on, or whatever the neurologist was going to say, there are going to be changes, but we can work through those things. There are steps you can take, like you said, not what simple tasks. You just have to follow steps. And I don't know if in the cognitive at the end, that it was even difficult for him to think of that. I don't know.
Well, he didn't know what he was dealing with. He didn't know that he probably had CTE. because he was getting ready to go see a good neurologist that would have got him there. And if you don't know what you're dealing with, when I didn't know, I mean, we watched a movie Concussed with Will Smith, and my wife got teary-eyed and said, "That's you." You know, I watched Concussed American Dream and Tyler leaving the refrigerator open or milk on the counter. That's me. But if you don't confront the issue or find out what's wrong, we can't look at it head on and say, this is it. Now what do I do? You can't do it. And I just want to stress, I mean, I got a Rolodex of people I call when I'm dark. And I'm so thankful for that because I can't rely on just my wife. And my wife is my caregiver. And I know you started connecting with CLF, you told me, Kelly, and that's awesome. You know, my wife's a caregiver in the group. She's also in the ambiguous loss. And the ambiguous loss group is, I didn't know it, and I got teary-eyed on the podcast when we talked about it because I didn't know what it meant. It's losing, it's a different person than who you were with. And for my wife to have to go do a group to learn how to deal with somebody that she didn't marry 26 years ago is heartbreaking to me because, oh my God, am I that bad? You know, and then I get negative because I think of it, and then I stay in this negative mood and I can't get out of it. And Casey, and I mean, we talked about this deep.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, I do not blame Pete for what he did. I can't say it was a cowardly act. I can't.
Yeah, you know, one thing that I've really processed, I've been very perceptive to this whole thing, and it's been rough, but one thing I've really thought about is he's not in pain anymore. As hard as that is to come to realization with, and it's going to take everyone a long time, like, he's not suffering anymore. Because, I mean, I saw that man go through a lot, and I saw him try, and I saw him fall down, and I saw him get back up, and it was just always a constant battle for him. But one thing that I'm at peace with is, number one, that man had love in his heart. I saw it in his final days. And he was close with the Lord, number two. So I know he's up in heaven. And number three, my father is at peace. My father is not hurting anymore. Because that's one thing he didn't like to do. Like when he would go through his rage, you know, he would act out, but he would regret it. And Kelly can agree with me on that. We've talked about it a lot. It's like he would instantly just break down and regret what he did. So he didn't want to hurt people. He didn't want to hurt himself, but he was in so much pain. And so I don't blame him either, Corey. I really don't, but I do miss him. And yeah, man, it's just rough, you know?
Oh, terribly rough. I couldn't imagine. I mean, I've lost friends. You've lost friends to suicide. And dealing with that is separate than, you know, you losing your son's probably the closest thing. And that's not even that. You know, me losing my father and my mother, I lost them both due to cancer. But I knew it was coming. I dealt with it by watching the digression. It wasn't an all of a sudden movement and now it's gone. You know, when I get the phone call of a buddy of mine that shot himself in his pickup at midnight, that's startling enough. But it's not family.
Yeah.
And so we like to, and if there's anything you two need, please reach out. I know that you've asked for if anybody's donating anything to donate to the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Am I correct, Casey? Yeah. And so you can reach out to concussionlegacyfoundation.com.
Yeah.
Make a donation. If you need help, if you're struggling and you're trying to find hope, you know, you can reach out to the suicide hotlines. You can reach out to the Head Rush podcast. You can reach out to a friend. You know, I'm sure if Jimbob was still on the line, he would have wished that, you know, Pete would have just called him and said, hey, dude, I'm struggling. But I'll tell you right now, when I'm in that deep hole, I don't want to call them numbers because they don't understand. You know, I needed a list of people like Paul that understand because they've been in that dark hole. And if you don't understand it, it's lonely up here. I'm battling myself 24 hours a day. I can't sleep sometimes because this thing just won't shut off. And if you're struggling, reach out and talk to somebody. Reach out and talk to a pastor. You know, talk to a friend. Talk to a family member. It's not worth the sacrifice. You know, it may be ease for us, but look what it does to a family. You know, reach out and get help.
I know we usually ask our guests to share with us how they're hopeful for the future of CTE or how they, but I want to tell you, you two have given me hope, right? And you know, the knowledge we have, we want to share. And you two, the two of you you embraced the opportunity to teach us about Pete. I didn't know Pete. Now I think I know him just a little bit. And he seemed like just a fantastic human being. And thank you. And
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
What a
yeah,
picture.
you know,
Look
we
at that.
appreciate. Yep, yeah, I love it.
It's awesome.
You know, some of my coworkers got me some pictures if you can see it.
That's
Oh, that's awesome.
That's powerful.
Yeah, that was at our last rodeo we announced in July.
Yeah. That's great.
You know, Chad Nicholson was a real good friend of mine, and I always thought about going to rodeo announcing school and doing that. And I was going to go to Chad's rodeo school in Carrollton, Texas. Before he passed away, he got in an auto accident. Jeep rolled on top of him. But it was, I can't comprehend. I know what I want to say. But by the time I know what I want to say and what I say are two different things.
That was Pete.
Yeah,
That was Pete a lot. I had to work
100%.
really hard helping him at the rodeos, and I was not familiar. I ran the music, and he was knowledgeable, but his brain it just needed to struggle.
Yeah.
Right. So,
KC, did you want to say something?
Yeah, you know, I just wanted to say how much my family and I, Kelly included, you know, we appreciate you guys so much, and y'all have a friend in myself and my family forever because, you know, when all of this happened, you know, there were the little things that were known. But ever since I started talking to Corey and starting to get to know you a little bit, Paul, it's just like I've learned so much, and you guys are bringing hope to something that isn't talked about enough. Because this is happening. I mean, I have friends that play football. I still have friends that rodeo, just all contact sports. And it seems to be happening more and more. And just the fact that you guys are willing to come to the public and spread awareness and spread knowledge, it just means a lot to my family. And I know it means a lot to anybody who's tuning in, because I know I've got a lot of friends that are watching the show and tuning in. So just thank you guys.
and thank you for being willing to come on and talk about such a sensitive subject. And, you know, and you hear me say it, Casey, when me and you have long talks is, you know, it's hard for me to feel it.
Yeah.
But I'm thankful that you're willing to come on and talk and bring awareness to such a horrible disease. And we'll keep following up with the University of Pittsburgh And when we get the information, we'll invite you back on and we'll talk more about it. Kelly, you're welcome to come on. If you need anything, please reach out, ma'am. You know, we Southern folk, we like to be there for each other.
Yes, sir.
Heck yeah.
You know, in Arizona, Southern folk too. They're Southern United States.
Yep.
No, now I grew up in New
It's a
Hampshire.
little different out here, but yeah.
I was born in Elmira, New York, and grew up in New Hampshire. Now you're going to call me a Yankee, aren't you? Well, we love you guys.
Pennsylvania. So
We love you guys. Our new family. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And please go to our Facebook page, our Instagram, our YouTube channels. Please share, like, follow, comment, go to our website. If you have any suggestions of what you want us to talk about or anyone you think's important, please reach out to us and let us know and tell us how we're doing.
We do this to raise awareness of this disease, and we do this, and again, we feel like family with Kelly and Casey, and thank you for letting us be a part of your family. So
Thank you.
with that, what do we say? Stay alert, and stay alive. So
All right.
we love you guys.
This podcast is for general information only and does not constitute the practice of medicine. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard and delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.